All right, so welcome everyone to the June 2022 edition of the Collaboration Cafe, which is sponsored by the Midwest Big Data Innovation Hub. We are sponsored by NSF ourselves, and so we thank them for their support. And I'm also very happy to have a program officer from NSF joining us today as well. But just to begin, my name is John MacMullen, and I'm the Executive Director of the Midwest Big Data Innovation Hub. We'll talk in a minute about who we are and what we do, but I do want to welcome Dr. Juan Lee joining today as a program officer related to the CRII program that we will be talking about today. So thank you very much, Dr. Lee, for taking the time to join us today.
Oh, thank you.
And I also want to welcome to the call some of the prior awardees of the CRII program who are here to tell us a little about their experiences proposing to this program. Thank you for being here as well. As I mentioned before we started recording, the input from prior awardees is really very valuable. We've had a lot of feedback from viewers and participants about how important that is to understanding the process of developing federal agency proposals, and in particular for early career programs like we're looking at today, and the career program from NSF that we've looked at on a previous webinar. This may be the first proposal that an early career person is developing, and so this can be very valuable to see others' experiences in that space. All right, so for those who are unfamiliar with the Midwest Big Data Hub, I'll just mention that we are an NSF-funded project and part of a national network of 4 hubs across the country, really focusing on building communities and sharing resources around data and data science, research data more broadly. And so if there are folks who are watching from outside of the 12-state Midwest region, definitely encourage you to reach out to your the hub that's in your particular geographic region and look at the opportunities that they have to engage on programs like this and others. We're a very close network. We meet weekly and develop programs together, and we'd be happy to talk with you more about your interests in data and related areas. Here in the Midwest, we are a partnership of 6 universities led out of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, specifically through the National Center for Supercomputing Applications. But we have multiple universities who are collaborative awardees on this project, and lots of other partners across the region as well, particularly across different sectors, so industry, government, academia, and nonprofit partners. We have a number of priority areas and cross-cutting themes that we focus on that are really driven by the regional strengths and community interests that folks have. And the program that we're looking at today really relates probably most broadly to the data science education and workforce development track that we have, along with cyber infrastructure and data sharing. All right, so what is this series all about? I'll just go very quickly through a couple of slides here for those who are new to this series. We had a lot of feedback in the past couple of years about the need for a neutral sort of party that could help bring together collaborators across the Midwest to look at developing proposals together in response to federal agency solicitations and foundations. And so, you know, really embracing that multidisciplinary, multi-institutional research drive that is really prevalent these days, and facilitating some of those connections and community building. That's really what we're here to do, and we do that each month by looking at a particular solicitation from a variety of funders and talking through the details of that, along with where there may be gaps and opportunities in the Midwest for people to collaborate. We do have occasional lightning talks on this webinar. So if you know folks who are interested in presenting their research in alignment with the topics that we have each month, we'd be happy to hear from them and set that up. So beyond the webinar series itself, we do have a website that hosts the upcoming sessions that we have, along with the recordings and slides from prior sessions, as well as a Slack community and some shared documents that may be relevant to folks who are interested in each month's topic. I'll go ahead and put today's spreadsheet in the chat for you all. This is the list of prior CRII awards that were made in the Midwest in the past few cycles. And so folks who are interested in this particular program can take a look at those examples of what has been already funded and see not only what is already out there, but examples of the types of scope and range of projects that NSF has funded in this space. All right, the MBDH does engage with proposers in different ways, and so I would encourage folks, if you're looking for letters of collaboration or other ways of partnering with the hub, we'd be happy to have those conversations with you. We can do that in a number of different ways. Currently, we're very interested in partnering with proposers to the NSF Engines program, which has rolled out recently. All right, so let's get into our discussion of the CRII program. This is the CISE Research Initiation Initiative, so driven out of the CISE Directorate, which is where I think the majority of our audience is focused on in terms of NSF collaborations. This program is due in early September, and so we always on this webinar try to do this in a few months in advance to give folks some lead time to think about ideas and collaborations for upcoming due dates. This is really focused on early career scholars, and so really focused on that first role that you have as a faculty member or as a researcher. How do you establish your research program and start to develop a track record of research activity and publication that helps you build the early phase of your career? And so really important to have a federal level funder supporting early career folks in this way. The NSF Career Program is similar in that respect and really benefits a large number of early career faculty each year. For this particular program, NSF says that they expect to fund 55 to 60 awards in this particular cycle. This has been an annual competition for several years, and it does look to be an ongoing program. And so quite a few awards that they expect to fund in this cycle, and those would be up to $175,000 total budget over 24 months. And I'm seeing in the chat here that the proposal due date is actually the 19th of September. My apologies for that. We will get that updated on the slides here. We do like to look at on this call things like eligibility and whether there's any pre-proposal kinds of work that needs to be done. In this particular case, there is no requirement for a letter of intent or pre-proposal, but this is a multi-division program across CISE, and so it's always a good idea to reach out to a program officer to talk about the scope of work that you'd like to propose, and in this case, it would be good to do that to make sure that you're aligned with the correct division of the CISE Directorate in this case. Let's talk about eligibility for a minute, because this is really critical for this program. As we said, this is very focused on early career people, and so the PI for this, you can only have one PI on this proposal. You can't have co-PIs or other senior personnel, and so this is really focused again on building a single person's research program. you must also be an untenured faculty member or equivalent kind of research position in the first 3 years of your appointment after you've received your PhD. So you have to have received your PhD at the time of award, and you have to have a academic position that I think leads to tenure. So a visiting position does not count towards the time, the clock here in terms of the timing. But you also must be within 6 years of the completion of your PhD. So again, they're really trying to scope this to folks who are recent awardees of the doctorate and within the very early part of their careers. You cannot have received any prior grants or contracts as a PI, although you can have served as a co-PI or senior personnel, I believe, prior to this. I did want to ask Dr. Lee, there are cases where new faculty, particularly in the sciences, receive some startup funding from their university or their department to help them, get established in their first position. And so sometimes that may actually be cash towards their research program. Sometimes it may just be, a research assistant student to work with them. What do you have some advice from NSF about what is allowed in terms of departmental or institutional support and still be compliant with this eligibility?
I'm looking at my slides. There's several things here. One is the one you mentioned, the non-R1, but there's an exception there saying that for OAC, we don't have this requirement. It's case we're going by case by case, as long as they can demonstrate the need, right? And in terms of, I think officially they cannot have a prior federal grant as a PI. They could be as a co-PI. It's okay, right? Right. Okay. So therefore, I think that was a previous one. They cannot have a support from the university already. That was the previous one. And for the current one, I don't know how to verify that. So, right. So really, it's your department letter can actually support that, right?
Yeah, and we'll talk about that departmental letter in a moment.
Okay.
It sounds like it would be a good idea if someone proposing to this program has received some kind of startup funding as a new faculty member. You probably want to mention that when you reach out to NSF and make sure
right.
that you are eligible.
Yes, when you reach out to PD, yes. Right, and it's definitely a great idea to always reach out to PD before your submission. Right, we still have time, like 3 months, so it's better to do that. Right.
Right. Yeah, it's better to do that sooner rather than later. And
yes, right.
I do want to mention that as an early career faculty member, it may be a little intimidating to contact a program officer who you don't know and make that contact, but that really is part of their job description. They do want to hear from you and
yes,
have those conversations.
Right.
So
correct. And also sometimes even set out the time to meet them. I had so many people set out the schedule, even meet virtually or even in person. Right. So contact them. Yes.
All right, very good. So just go back to eligibility for a minute. Again, with the intent here around funding early career people, the other sort of goal of NSF with this is to support institutions that don't have a lot of research infrastructure for faculty. And so there is an eligibility restriction to non-R1 institutions. And so universities that are not in that classification of a research R1 institution. The career program is open to folks from R1s, and so that's the alternative for you in that case. So non-R1 programs, so that includes predominantly undergrad institutions, other institutions that involve research, but just not at that top tier university level. However, also in this case, they are open to proposals from other non-academic institutions like nonprofits and laboratories. And so that provides an option for researchers and scholars who are not affiliated with a higher education institution, but another kind of research institute. They are able to propose to this program.
Right, and as I mentioned, I thought there's an exception too for if you are one and you don't have any support from your university, then you can still consider, but that's only for OAC, not the entire program, only for OAC.
Good.
Right.
All right. So for
Right.
the Office of Advanced Cyber Infrastructure, which is one of the CISE divisions, there may be an exception for that. So again,
Exactly.
really good to talk to the program officer.
Yes. Yes. Perfect. Thank you.
Great. All right, so let's get into a little more of the guidance that we have in the solicitation. I definitely want to encourage folks to read through the solicitation. This one is relatively straightforward. We have looked at others on this webinar that are very complex and detailed, but this one is quite straightforward. Definitely encourage you to read through that, but there are a couple of other opportunities to get information as well. There's an FAQ document linked from the CRI website currently, and there's also a webinar coming up officially from NSF on July 13th, where they will do a similar breakdown of the program and then ask you for your questions as a potential proposer around this. And so definitely encourage you to check that webinar out as well.
Right, if you look at this excuse me, this wording, right? The first graduate student. So just now you said a department sponsor. If a department sponsors something else that I don't think it's in the list, right? So it's okay if department has something else to sponsor you. Mm-hmm. But this one is really for you to find your first student, right?
Yeah, so I have underlined in the first paragraph.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Yes. The fact that this program does encourage proposers to include support for student researchers, if that is, makes sense for your particular research program. This is a good way to help you recruit that first set of graduate students or even undergrads to participate in your research program and help you build that pipeline of students that you work with over the course of your career. We'll talk in a little bit about the undergrad dimension here, which is a special case as well. But beyond that, they are giving you some scoping language about this being open to exploratory research and being able to acquire some early data about your research. So it doesn't really require, an established research program where you have to demonstrate that you've already produced results in a particular area. Again, this is for folks who are new to their career, and so they're giving you some guidance about the kinds of preliminary work that they expect you to talk about in the proposal. So I think, being in this position previously, one of the things to think about is as you think about your career path and your research interests, how can this particular program help you get to step 2? This is sort of step 1. How do you get to the next step where the outputs from this work that you do help you develop the next proposal, the larger proposal or the more focused proposal in a particular area? And so having that sort of longer term perspective as you start to think about what goes into this proposal, I think can really help you get on the right track for the later stage. And maybe we'll hear from some of the prior awardees that we have on the call later about how this program may have led to other proposals and future work that they developed. All right, so let's talk about what's included in this particular proposal. This has some pretty standard NSF proposal elements. Again, if this is your first NSF proposal, you're not necessarily familiar with that, but things like the one-page project summary or the project description where you talk about the work that you're planning to do, the budget and the justification for the budget, those are all very standard NSF proposal elements. And so you'll get some good experience developing those. Beyond that, the data management plan is a requirement for pretty much all federal agency proposals, so that we have a sense of what happens to the data and the outputs from your project. Where do they live for the long term? How do people get access to them to reuse or to build upon? So really important to have that element here. And then there's a couple of supplementary documents specific to this particular program. Dr. Lee mentioned the department head letter. There's a template linked from the solicitation to the particular structure that NSF is looking for there, but that speaks to the eligibility of the proposer and the fact that this is their first position and they meet the requirements that we talked about earlier. Couple of other dimensions here. We talked about the fact that this can help fund students, and so there is a program for research in undergraduate institutions, the RUI program from NSF, that helps support undergraduate researchers, and so it is possible to link the CRII program to the RUI program and help again, bring in undergrad researchers to help with your research. And so if that is a program that you can take advantage of here, definitely, again, encourage you to explore that with NSF and with your institution. Dr. Lee, I wanted to ask about postdocs because they were not referenced explicitly in the solicitation, but is it possible to fund postdocs through this program? As a personnel on the PI's project?
There's no restriction on that, but I'm not sure there's enough funding for it.
Yeah.
So yeah. Right.
One of the reasons I ask about that is that there are, if you do have postdocs on other proposals, there's a requirement for the postdoc mentoring plan, and I didn't see that mentioned here. So just
exactly. Sure. So it's not required. Definitely not required. Yes.
Great. Another element that is relatively new to NSF solicitations is cloud computing resources. And so the Cloud Bank organization that's funded through NSF provides a sort of gateway to a variety of cloud computing resources through industry and other sources. And so that it's an opportunity in this case to allocate part of your budget to any computing resources in that respect that you would need. I think I do have a note here on the next slide that that has to be within the 175K maximum budget for this. And so if you are allocating part of your budget to Cloud Bank resources, that's going to come off of that total. You can't add that on. So just to step back here for a minute, that's one of the, if you do take advantage of that, that is one of the supplementary documents that you have to include, is the details of that usage and the budget for that. NSF does provide a very helpful submission checklist in the solicitation. So again, make sure that you take a look at that and you're including all of the required elements before that gets submitted. Typically your sponsored research office at your institution will help you confirm that. But again, this is intended for institutions that don't necessarily have really robust research infrastructure. And so it may be the case that you are really needing to do a lot of that work yourself as the PI here. All right, and then just to follow up on the sort of other resources that NSF is recommending here, there's a number of programs that NSF supports around cyber infrastructure and other kinds of research related resources that they specifically call out in the solicitation about, if this aligns with the work that you're proposing, make sure that you check those out and see if it would be relevant to include those in the work that you do. Not all of them will be relevant, of course, but there's a lot of work that has been done that may be of use to you as an early career proposer here. I did want to ask you, Dr. Lee, do you know whether the sort of exceed and going forward, the access program resources would apply here as well?
Yes, SS just have yesterday, right? 2 days ago. Yeah, they just have a workshop or webinar. Yes, yep. Right. Yeah. So when you're done with this, I also have 2 slides to show. So when you're done, I will show my 2 slides to explain. Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
I have one more to go, and then I'll turn it over to you to fill in all my gaps that I have left out here.
I think you cover everything. I just want to emphasize some key points.
Sounds great. Yeah. So yeah, I guess just to finish off here, if you're an early career person, you may not be aware of all of the other resources that NSF has funded around cyber infrastructure. It is quite substantial. And so again, reaching out to your program director, but also just exploring what is available can be very beneficial so that you don't have to pay for things that may already be provided by someone else. All right, and then just to wrap up here, one of the things that you always want to know, regardless of your career stage, is how the reviewers are going to look at this proposal and decide whether they're going to fund you or not. And so again, in this case, we have a couple of standard review criteria that NSF uses for every proposal, and that's the intellectual merit and broader impacts criteria. You'll see those defined in the solicitation in quite a bit of detail. But in this particular program, there are a couple of review criteria that are specific to CRII. And so I've got the quote here that they're looking for, again, enough results from this particular program to really help you develop your career and as well more funding proposals down the road. And so again, looking at that trajectory of your career and your interests and seeing if you can anticipate what would be beneficial in the future, that would be really helpful to you, but also in telling that story to the reviewers so that they get a sense that you understand, how this may unfold for you over time. All right, so I'm going to stop there, and Dr. Lee, feel free to go ahead and share your screen.
Let me see, I can share my 2 slides on this. Actually, I work with Ellen on these slides. Can you see my slides here?
I can.
Yeah, I think this just repeat what John just said, but there's some new things, especially the question I tried to answer him just now. If you already receive your department startup package, then can you still apply? Well, the key thing is if you can still get a letter from your department saying that your package is not sufficient, you still need more, then you can still apply. If the department says, oh, you have enough, you don't need any more, then you cannot apply. Right, so it's really up to your department. So this is the one I want to emphasize to clear up my answer to that question. And another thing also is a repetition of what John said, it's that you cannot be a PI, but you could be a co-PI in the previous ones. And one thing I also say that if you're coming from R1, and the only exception is that from R1, you can submit to OAC, but then we still need to look at the case that even though in R1's institution, but you don't have a sufficient support, then we might consider it. Right, so that is the only exception. For the rest of them, you cannot have R1. Okay, but for OAC, we still can have R1. And in terms of position, most likely it's tenure check, and it's also okay to be a research scientist or even education position, like teaching faculties is okay as long as you can justify, as long as your department give you the letter. And another thing very important is that during our review, or even when my boss asked me why we're funding this project, the first question they always ask me, it's that how is this related to OAC? So if you want to submit to OAC, make sure you have something that can justify that that's related to OAC. If you want to submit to, say, CCF, you need to justify it's related to CCF, or AI, IIS. So you need to make it clear why we are going to support you from this division, right? We have 4 divisions, right? And I think most of us know for OAC, we're doing the cyber infrastructure research, or we use cyber infrastructure to do research, right? So those are all related, right? One is the cyber infrastructure research itself, one is using the cyber infrastructure to do other research, right? I think you heard about CSSI, those are CSSI. And a lot of time our research we're looking for is a computational or data intensive research. Okay, and so that's something I want to emphasize. For the this one, I think this is just a repetition of the and we talk about it's kind of important. We want to emphasize in the proposal that how do we reach out the underserved community, right? That's another important. One is the number one important is how is it related to OAC. The second important, you want to try to reach out, right? So I think that's it. Are there any questions for me? Thank you, John. You cover everything, so I don't have to talk much. Yes. Okay.
John, I think you're muted, John.
Thanks very much for that. Are there questions for Dr. Lee at this point from the folks we have on the live call here?
Going once, twice, so.
All right, so
Okay.
before we get into our offline discussion here, we have a few prior awardees of the CRII program on the call with us today. Is there anyone who would like to make any comments about your experiences on the recording here for folks to see in the future? Is there anything that you'd like to talk about in terms of how this influenced your early research development and collaborations? Be happy to hear from any of you at this point on that.
Maybe I can start.
Thanks,
so I think one of the things that for this particular proposal was that for people that are outside CS, I'm coming from industrial engineering, the CRII proposal is not very well known. And as long as your research falls within the CRII scope, you can still apply. There's no restriction to CS folks. So I think that was one area that when I was talking to my peers from engineering that I didn't feel that there was a lot of, actually the way I heard about CRI was also from a colleague from CS and me trying to go into it. So I think that was one of the key points that, you don't have to be within CS, and as long as your research falls within this, then you can apply. And I think this was a great way for you to start the career, to start collecting some information when you are trying to apply for careers. Some of the things that you do here might potentially contribute towards your career. And I will definitely use some of the results from here for when I do the career application this year. So I think that was a very, very pivotal thing. One other thing I want to mention was some of the rejections that I received in my first year, they were actually very helpful for me to mature the kind of proposal and research questions that I was able to put forward. So I'm actually thankful for those rejections, for showing me a way to come up with a more comprehensive idea for the proposal.
That's great. And so you raise a couple of really important points there. One is that you may not always get awarded the first time, even if you have a good idea, but you can benefit from the reviewer's comments. But also you can apply to this program multiple times if you haven't been awarded. And so don't give up if you don't get it the first time. As long as you still meet the eligibility requirements, you can apply again. And then thirdly, you mentioned the career program. So it is possible to apply for a career award after you've received this. You can't do it the other way and get a career first and then apply for CRII. But it is possible to do career second. So keep that in mind as well. Other comments that folks on the call would like to make?
Maybe I just follow up with his comments about the review, just based on my very, very limited experience about submitting proposal to the NSF, compare like a CRI's review comments versus like the core program's review comments. I think the CRI's reviews comments more like a senior person try to help you understand your research idea better and give you a lot of suggestions how you can improve maybe your future proposals, versus like my experience from the core small programs experience. They are more like critique and more like I would say more hash comments from that program. Yeah, so I learned a lot. Like again, like my first try got like denied, but the second try got awarded. So again, like just to try that, don't like give up. And also I feel like I think I was awarded like a few years ago, and as the time passing by, the criteria for the CRIs kind of like a higher, the bar becomes higher and higher. So like, well, my suggestion for the person who might want to apply, like apply early. So otherwise, we don't know like how the policy may change, or how the eligibility may change. Yeah.
Yeah, there's never going to guarantee that a particular program will continue forever in the future, and so it's always good to apply when it makes sense for your career as soon as you can. I also wanted to ask, since we do have prior awardees on the call, you received these awards. I think in most cases are beyond the 2-year window, if I remember correctly. So what sort of activities did you do to transition from this award into maybe other proposals or other kinds of collaborations as you started to, move forward in your career?
Yeah, I can go ahead and go on that, because I think my experience with CRII was quite unique from that perspective. So I applied for CRII in 2018, first semester that I was a junior faculty. And I think my background's a little bit different. I'm not in CS and I'm not in engineering, actually. I'm in business school. So I'm in an information systems department. So at the time, I think there was only one other IS person that had ever been awarded a CRII back in 2018 at that time. That there might have been more that have come out since then. But from a business school perspective, it was very unusual to get something like that at that point in time, as such. And I think just because the nature of the way that business schools work, it's less so about grant related funding and more so about peer reviewed journal articles in a set number of journals as such. So so I was awarded I applied in 2018, and then I got the notification in January of 2019. And this is actually at University of South Florida is where I got the notification. Got the notification that I was going to be recommended for funding, and then government shut down. So I didn't get the funds until actually I think it was August or July or August of 2019. Well, in January of 2020, I accepted a position to join Indiana University. So I actually didn't spend any funds that first year. And then when I joined Indiana University, that's when I actually started using funds. So technically, I'm wrapping up my second year of activities now in terms of those different sets of things that are going on. So even though I had applied for it back in 2018, the CRI activities, I still have an annual report due in a few weeks and so on now. But I think to answer your question, John, in terms of what kinds of activities were done during that time frame, what I found to be really useful for me personally, two things. Well, on the research side, the research that I had proposed was actually stuff that I had initially thought of when I was a doctoral student, and what I had initially kind of proposed as part of my my dissertation, and then kind of took it over to completion after the funding was awarded. But then I think what the CRI did for me personally was that it actually gave me a foot into NSF in a way that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So I was able to go to like the SAT CPI meeting, for instance, right? And then really start to use that as a seed to go and network and talk with other program managers. And then from there, I was able to get onto a review panel. And then from the review panel, I was able to get supplements and then other grant activities as a result of that. So using the CRI as a foothold to start building out my network, and then start to go out and branch out my research program, branch out my education program. That's where it was very useful for me, more so than the funding, the dollar amount aspect, just simply because the dollar amount, I didn't have access to that for like the first 2 years that I had the CRI. So I had to use the mechanisms in a different way.
Yeah, very informative, and thanks very much for that, Sagar. You know, you're very focused on cybersecurity dimensions, but I think you illustrate some of the complexity here in terms of timing and moving departments and really taking advantage of the other opportunities that NSF provides to get engaged. It's a great example.
I actually have a question for Dr. Lee. So for me, when I moved, it was from an R1 to an R1 institution, and there wasn't any restrictions at the time on that.
Yes.
It was a clean break off. I mean, it was a clean, just paperwork, which is a change of institution and so on. I'm curious now if it was somebody who got it in R2 and then they switched jobs to an R1, would it transfer with them?
I know this is yeah, I think somebody talked about that when we putting the restriction. So our goal is still that we're hoping to help R2, right? So we don't hope to see the situation. Right.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And I think this is one of the few cases where the funding, follows the PI more closely than, typically NSF says that they make awards to institutions, not to PIs.
Yes,
right? So,
that's a different, that's an exception, right? It's supposed to stay with the institution, right?
With this and with career, they have more flexibility,
Right.
and that people do move around in their careers to different institutions.
Right. So yeah, so maybe we kind of outside of this. So that's why we try to do some kind of checkpoint for the career one to avoid that they're moving around. Right.
I saw that Christina unmuted. Did you want to add something as well?
Yeah, I wanted to add that I feel like this is not only just helping me, also help my students a lot. Mm-hmm. I was able to meet the students even just with 1 year funding that to a program when the world just collapsed during COVID, and then she was able to keep doing research. And I have undergrad. I also applied. I used supplements last year, so I was able to kind of work with a few undergrad students, and one of them, because of the experience, got accepted to another PhD program. So I feel like there's this kind of influence. It's beyond just research, and also I think potentially change their life too. So it's very, I think it's just a very great experience for all of us.
Yeah, great point. Thank you for that comment. And yeah, I should note that all of this is happening during a pandemic, everything that Sagar mentioned and other folks. So lots of things happening, and you guys are doing great to keep that all up during all these times. We have a few minutes left if folks would like to add other comments here, but this has been really helpful. I want to go ahead and share my screen again to just remind folks who are watching the recording here that we have a couple of other sessions coming up in July. We will be focused on the NSF SATC program that Sagar mentioned. So this is on cybersecurity and related topics. And then in August, we'll be looking at the NSF POSE program. This is a new program this year that is focused on developing open source ecosystems and the communities that support them. So definitely come back and check that out on our live session if you would like to have a discussion with prior awardees on those calls as well. And we have a number of other ways that you can get involved with the hub organizations. As I mentioned previously, Sagar is someone I know from prior hub activities. We had a cybersecurity and data science workshop that was put together previously, and Sagar was a big part of that. So there's definitely opportunities to build your network with the hub community, as well as folks in your disciplines and at your institution. Any other comments from you, Dr. Lee, today about what NSF is expecting from this program, or advice for proposers?
Well, thank you for inviting me first, and thank you for everyone for talking about so many good words about CRII. Thank you, appreciate that. And I hope you can spread the word and we can get more proposals. Like the more proposals we get, the better quality we get. So thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Any other comments from the other participants here?
I'll just make the comment, and I'm not saying this because we're recorded and there's a program officer here. I really think that CRII was like one of the coolest experiences for my career, actually, because you got like there's this age-old like guidance, right? When you're a junior faculty, you want to go after grants, you just become a co-PI with a senior faculty and then go down that direction. I just found that to be like, just that there weren't opportunities for junior faculty to get into the game, right? Apart from that. And I really felt that CRII was a mechanism that allowed junior faculty to get into the game and at least be able to put a foothold into the environment. And for me personally, especially being in a business school, that was massively helpful. So CRII was, the money is one aspect of it, but then just the things that come along with it, of being part of the club after getting one and being part of that network was far greater and far more important and substantial for me. And it just launched things that I wouldn't have imagined otherwise.
Great comment. Glad to hear that. And I definitely encourage early career folks to join this call as well, because that was part of the feedback that we received was, it can be really challenging for an early career person to participate on a really large scale proposal. You're not in a position where you could lead that yourself. And if you don't have a strong network already, it can be hard to get on as a PI or as a co-PI or as a senior personnel. And so joining the discussion that we have here and starting to build your network with people from across the Midwest and across the country can be a good way to start to take advantage of those opportunities and look at those really large scale proposals that are out there. All right, well, thank you all very much again for joining today. This was super interesting to hear your experiences, and thanks, Dr. Lee, as well, for your perspective today. This has been great.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.